Hey, Chris, how are you? Thank you so much for taking the time to chat about product marketing here. And we're all busy, and we're both dads. We were just talking about that
It's true.
when we were coordinating. So very much appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Why don't you take a quick second to introduce yourself, and how'd you get into product marketing? It seems like it's this incredibly dynamic role within the organization. Frankly, I didn't really understand it maybe I think 3 years ago, right? And now over the last couple years, I've started to really dig in, and it seems to me that the product marketer, and I've said this a couple of times and I'm kind of standing by it, feels like this extension of the founding team, right? A lot of the stuff that we do as early founders is product market fit messaging, all those user interviews, all the things that we're doing right now at SMU, right? To get this thing going. It feels like there's this entrepreneurial stakeholder that you have to be this product marketer, and be able to do a lot of those things. And one of the things that really comes to mind also as I just talk to product marketers is if you're early and I suppose this could be at later stage companies as well, but if you're disconnected from that leadership team, that founder team, and doing these things in a silo, that could be a big problem. But anyways, how'd you get into product marketing?
Well, let's touch back on that in a little while. But yeah,
Right,
because I believe a lot of the things you just said are top of mind for a lot of people that are doing this work. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I found product marketing. And I feel like for people who have an entrepreneurial spirit or maybe have been founders in the past, it's a great spot to be. And I found myself in product marketing because of that. And I'll kind of talk about how I got here. Back kind of early in my career, I started working at one of these eBay stores. If you remember these stores where you bring your collectibles in and say, hey, would you sell these for me on eBay? It was actually a plot point in the 40-year-old virgin. So luckily I was early on in my career. So I took a job after tending bar. After college, I was tending bar for a while. I didn't really know what I needed to do. And I realized I needed to stop being a bartender, and I needed to figure out, okay, how can I be a day animal versus a night animal? And so I went and I took a job at this store, and I was getting paid $6.50 an hour at an eBay store. It was called Easy Bayer. And so I would sit at the front, and I would bring in items, and I would talk with people about the value of their items. They would bring something in. It's a collectible that they paid a lot of money for 2 years ago. They're coming in, hey, I want you to sell this for me. I paid $2,500 for it. So I'd like to sell it for $2,500. And so I got a little bit of taste of not only customer success there, kind of navigating through, okay, well, let's see what these are realistically selling for, do some market research, right? You're looking, okay, well, let's look at the sold items on eBay. Let's look and see what we could realistically get for it. You've got to talk with that person and kind of get them to come down off their mountain, right? I realize that you paid that much for it, but the time has passed and it's used and all of those things. And maybe it's a collectible that you thought would get you rich down the road. And it just turns out the market is not ripe for getting you rich with this right now. Yeah. So a lot of those difficult conversations I had to have early on, but then we had to take the product in if it was worth selling and promote it, right? We had to write an ad for it, present it in a compelling way so that we could maximize the value that we would get from whatever item is. And if it was truly one of a kind, then we could get really creative. And there was less competition, but the majority of things, there was 500, 600 items out there just like it. So how do you stand out above the rest? And you have to present things in a certain way. So I kind of got geeked out on that, Jorge. We're bringing things in. We could get fun with the headlines. And I learned there that it was the headline. The headline's job is to get you to click in, right? That's all it's doing. It's just to get you to click in. I need to be found in search, but then I just need you to click in so that you can see a compelling story. And they actually had a subhead type thing in eBay as well. So you could use that strategically to kind of bait the click and get people to come in. And then the first line of the listing is there to get you to read the second line. All the things we know about copywriting, I sort of learned on the job there. I was quickly recruited by
hands-on.
Hands-on.
Yeah, super hands-on.
Day, right? Totally. So, and then I was quickly recruited by this company that was started by some Radio Shack executives, and it was going to be the big eBay store, right? Which it's funny to think about now. Everybody can just snap something on their phone and then post it up Facebook Marketplace, and that's kind of how that goes today. But at this point, we had 5 trucks that were going around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex here in Texas, and it's a big area to cover. So we would send trucks out to people's houses so that we weren't reliant on what people would bring us. We could go and get a bunch of things from somebody's house and say, oh, what about that over there? And I kind of got exposed to some executive thinking, right? And I gained a lot of chops by working directly with these people who had seen much further along companies than I had. So I was able to sort of pick up a lot of things along the way. One of my mentors there, Stu, he was the chief operating officer for Radio Shack in his prior life before this. And one thing he taught me at that point is that you shouldn't ever look to manage people, because at this point I'm leading a team and I became director of operations. I was running the logistics and warehouse and copywriting and customer success and all these kinds of things. And he said, look, you don't really look to manage people, right? You build relationships with the people. You manage the process that they're following. And
I love that.
And then it allows you to focus on the outcomes. And you can say, hey, okay, well, what do we expect to happen? What happened? And what would we do differently next time? And another kind of aspect of that was, well, if there's something that's repetitive and you can build a process for, it's pretty cut and dry. It's like, well, did we follow the process here? And if the answer is no, then, well, okay, let's redirect back to the process. If we did follow the process and it didn't work out, or we got an unexpected outcome, well, let's look and revisit the process. So I learned so much about working with people from this role. And I also learned a lot about strategy. And one of the things that we came across is that it was really time intensive and expensive to sell someone's couch, which we were doing because we would go pick up a bunch of stuff to people's houses. But everyone in their home, they had a cell phone drawer. And at this time, there was no process by which to trade in your phone at the carrier store or wherever you buy it. So everyone just had this drawer in their kitchen or in their office, and it had 6 or 7 cell phones in it. So we got pretty good at finding that drawer, which almost everybody had. And we would bring all those cell phones back, and they were super simple to list. We could just take photos. We could copy and paste the specs. It's categorized and easy to, our job was just to accurately represent its condition. And they would fly off the shelves, and they were inexpensive to ship. The margins were way higher than most of the things that we were selling. So we ended up finding some market fit there. And we realized, hey, look, this is a lot of work selling all this other stuff. So I helped close the door on the rest of the business. We started a new business that was just focused on selling cell phones. And because we had this relationship with Radio Shack executives, they were able to call their buddies at Sprint and say, hey, can we put a cardboard box behind your retail counters and we'll buy phones when people come in? Let's just try it. So we tried it out in a few stores. We had a spreadsheet that everyone had, so they knew exactly how much to pay. And then we would back up that transaction. And then all those phones came to my garage, which was kind of a ton of fun. That only lasted a few months until we signed a few more carriers, AT&T and Verizon, and things just really blew up from there. So I quickly went from selling one-off phones to navigating the world of kind of B2B marketing, finding the guy in Hong Kong who would buy a spreadsheet's worth of phones, and had to really learn LinkedIn and B2B sales and building out a real go-to-market organization. So that was a ton of fun. I got to build teams. I got to kind of hone my copywriting efforts. During none of this period did I consider myself a product marketer at all, but I gained a lot of the things that I would use later. And so when I found some success there and we really blew up, there was an acquisition, and I was kind of at this moment where I could either kind of ride the wave of maybe being a VP or middle manager or something in this larger company, because I was early on in my career still, or I could go out on my own, and start a consultancy. And so I did that. I started a consultancy, and I started working with about 25% local businesses here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and then about 75% B2B companies. And this is about the time that inbound marketing and kind of HubSpot's methodology.
That ecosystem.
Yep. So I helped a lot of companies kind of implement content marketing programs for the first time. But I realized that they didn't know what to do with their leads, right? They didn't know how to communicate with them. And it always came back to that value proposition, is what I realized, is that their sales reps first you had to educate them on what like if somebody downloaded an ebook, that's not a lead, that's a contact, right?
Mm.
We can market to them and build a relationship with them over time, but that's not a demo request, right? They're not raising their hand. So had to kind of educate people there, but then digging into it, they didn't know what to say because they didn't understand the value of their product.
Mm.
And I would argue, Jorge, that at least, if not more than 60% of companies out there today have that same problem. They're not
Is there
tying back to the original mission and vision of what they're trying to do. And
mm.
so I found myself working with companies in that capacity to help, okay, well, let's tell a better story and let's figure out how can I tie all of this together so that when people come to the website, they say, oh shit, I need this, right? This is something I need. And I see that they see my pain point.
Mm.
So after working and doing the consulting thing and finding advisory roles within companies, I decided to go in-house, and I've worked with in-house teams for the last 4 or 5 years alongside some advisory roles. And when I found product marketing as a function within the company, I realized this is the place for entrepreneurs to be, because you have to be best friends with sales. You have to be best friends with the other functional marketers.
Yep.
And you have to be best friends with customer success, but also with the executive team, because if you don't have a founder in the CEO role, that CEO needs help pulling out their vision and guiding the team. And I've kind of seen that across the board. There are some great CEOs out there, but then there's CEOs that are kind of maintenance CEOs, and they come in after the founder has set the vision. And keeping everyone set to that vision, I feel like really largely rests on the back of product marketing, really giving them a leg up in doing that.
Yeah.
And I just find the work so rewarding, and we could dig into the nuts and bolts of it, but that's kind of how I found my way into the role. And it's just a great place that you can do a lot of impactful work. There's never any lack of variety. There's also never any lack of things to do. So you have to manage your time pretty well.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking to that specific point of things to do, it feels like the product marketer has just such a vast array of responsibilities. It could be messaging and positioning on the website. It could be doing focus groups and customer marketing type, things. But it could also do, like, or be doing like collateral or, decks and things like that. And, one thing I've realized too is that you have this subset of product marketers that are focused on strategy and high level stuff, and then you have these very hands-on ones, right, they're actually churning out assets and things of that nature. So it feels like if you don't have a leadership team and department heads who understand how to work with product marketing, I mean, everything that you said, it feels like the product marketer touches every channel, right? Sales, the other marketing functions and channels, and then has to interface with leadership. You just talked about that. So they're like this, this sort of conduit between all these organizations. And you can imagine if people are not aligned, or if these department heads or stakeholders don't understand the function, it could be a total mess, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one of the things that you can do to combat that, and because this is where a lot of people live, right? They may find themselves in a product marketing role, but the expectation is that this is a deck job or a PowerPoint job, right? Sure, there is some work that needs to be done there. I would always question, does the product marketing professional that you're paying, a good salary, need to be a graphic designer too? Do they? Like, not necessarily. Do you want to get the rest of the company aligned around a strategic vision, around a strategic narrative, around the story that you're telling, right? You can't bog this person down or these people down or this team down with one-off requests, right? And I think that's where people find themselves getting into trouble. And I learned some about this when I was kind of running a small agency consultancy. When you would start a relationship, things are going great. Maybe it's a year down the road, maybe it's 2 years down the road. At some point, the value of your strategic contributions start to get overlooked, mostly due to just familiarity bias, right? And this is why companies bring in consultants. They bring in outside advisors because they don't trust the people that they have on their team anymore. And it's not due to them not doing a good job always. A lot of it's just due to we trust what other people tell us first. And so it is probably paramount for that product marketing person in a company to maintain a strategic role and relationship with the rest of the people in the organization, and not find themselves getting scope creep and kind of getting tasks lobbed over and things like that. And I think one of the most important and easiest ways to do that is to define what product marketing is. And so many companies don't do that. Like, what does success look like for product marketing? What are we trying to do? Functionally, for each person on that team, it's equally important. And I learned this in a startup that I helped launch, partly due to kind of the nature of the product we were building. But I realized that the most successful people out there have composed a document that is something along the lines of how to work with Chris Handy, how to work with me, right? This can link off to something like, what is product marketing at X company? But it's also like, how do you work with me? And if you think about how most interactions go within a company, it's, hey, you should go talk to Jorge. Okay, so I'll send Jorge a Slack message, but I don't have any context to like what your areas of responsibility are, what your KPIs are, what you're measured on, what's important to you, other things you're working on now, all those kinds of things. So if you can give people a framework with which to interact with you, and this can be anything that you want, but it can also be as simple as, hey, I can be very direct when I talk with you. If you'd rather me not be direct, then definitely let me know, because I'm here to tell you the truth and make the best of both of our time. Right.
I gotta write that down, because that's awesome.
It's those kind of things that if you can just put in a document and say, hey, look, here's who I am, and you could put a video on this document. There's no formula to it. But if you just think critically about how you want people to interact with you, then you can expect that people can at least, like, you can send it to people. They can either ignore it or not. But if you haven't produced a document like this, then you can't expect anything other than what you're getting, which is getting stuff tossed at you
constantly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that, as we've been talking to PMMs over the last couple of months, it's like, oh, they're saying, well, we're creating assets for sales. Let's just say specifically sales collateral, but they're not using it, and they're going rogue. We talked about that when you were giving us some insights.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's inherently difficult for that PMM to actually be able to create deal or prospect specific assets for each salesperson and then each salesperson's prospects, right? It's just really difficult to scale. I think maybe like, AI systems and, systems like us, we're trying to figure that out. But like that, to your point, one of the things that we hear also is like, well, the salesperson just asked me yesterday to get them this, one pager that's personalized. Like, I can't do it, right?
Yeah.
I just cannot do it. And I certainly can't do 20 in a day. So I might be able to get something generic, but, or more high level, but even that, these quick turnarounds. So that makes a lot of sense. Speaking of,
one thing on that, Jorge, it's just usually when you get a request like that, hey, can you help me get a one pager for this? Or can you give me a deck for this? The first question always needs to be, hey, I'd love to help you figure this out. When do you need it? And I'd say most of the time, the answer is, I have a meeting in 2 hours. And
exactly.
Like, so the first thing you can do is make sure that in your how to work with me document, you address that and say, hey, look, if you need something in 2 hours, I want to help you. Right. But I can't help you create a one-off asset. What I can do, and what I've tried to do, is build a library of assets that you can use. Right. And that you can assemble something. And if you haven't done that, if you haven't given people sort of the building blocks to put something together, then it's time to look back at priorities, right? You've got to give people the building blocks to customize. But if you're taking those one-off requests and just constantly on a treadmill of cranking out one-sheeters, you're not doing the strategic level work that you need to be doing. And then it's a one-way ticket to
frustrationville, right? And burnout,
Yeah.
In fact, I won't name the company, but I was talking to a senior PMM at one of the top sales and engagement platforms out there, one of the two top ones.
Sure.
And they said specifically that they joined that company because product marketing was a strategic role.
Yeah.
And they were just tired of being the deck jockeys, and so that resonates a lot. Speaking of companies and responsibilities or focus, you were mentioning as we were prepping for the conversation that you're seeing a lot of PMMs now doing a bunch of stuff that is not tying back to the company vision. Why do you think that's happening? And, what can we do to not fall victim? Because I think it's, especially when markets are a little crazy, like they've been the last year and a half, and now you have AI popping up and everyone's like, oh, I got to pop, I gotta do chat GPT for XYZ.
Right.
How do you kind of stay disciplined or do it the right way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the example you used is interesting because you see people reacting quickly, saying, "Hey, okay, there's something new going on." There's an expectation that we build AI into our product, or we're getting asked about this. And so what a lot of product managers, product marketing managers, that the combination of those two things, and I think that those two roles will converge over time. And if they're not partnering closely on the development of features, then there's a problem at the company. But I'll save that for another time. But if you are just focused on how do we slap this in there, and then you launch off something like, hey, now we've got company XYZ GPT, right? And you just put those words on the end of your brand, and we've got some sort of content creation, generative AI aspect to it to help you write an email or whatever it is, then sure, maybe you've gotten some requests for that. But are we diluting our brand by just slapping OpenAI's brand on that? And is that what our customers really need, right? Are we tying back to something that's helping them do their job? Ultimately, this stuff's going to be baked into everything, and that's going to be an expectation. It's not necessarily a full-on extra feature or product. But the mistake people are making most here is they're not thinking critically about the development of these features or whatever it is. If you've been asked to launch something and you're a product marketing manager and you can't see immediately how this ladders back up to the company vision, then it's probably worth questioning whether or not you should be going down that road. There are a lot of companies out there that are just building this feature over here and they're building this feature over here. And I'm particularly concerned, Jorge, with how does this show up in the product, right? Do I go to this settings menu or the settings menu somebody else made over here? How many different places am I going to have to go to find and adjust settings and to kind of access these tools? Because a lot of these teams are kind of building different products within the same platform. And so things can kind of get scattered. So things get scattered from that perspective, just from a user experience perspective, but also from a customer understanding perspective. Because what you want with any launch or any new feature introduction or even a new platform introduction is that the reaction of the audience and of your prospects and your existing customers or your future customers, whatever it is, the reaction needs to be, oh, of course they would build that. This contributes toward that thing that I know this company does. And that can be tied to the vision, that can be tied to the mission of the company, whatever words you want to describe that one thing that you're known for, that needs to be evident in sort of the surfacing of whatever this feature is that you're out here building a tier 1 launch for, and you're building assets for, and you're figuring out how do I do a webinar. You can get bogged down in the nuts and bolts of a launch. Every first Tuesday we launch this, and then we run a webinar and we do this. So you've got your checklist and you've got your process, which is great. You want to have a process, as we talked about before, at least to start from. But also you need to tie back to that vision and ultimately that customer's understanding of what your company is. Every time you step outside the bounds of what your company is supposed to be for, it needs to be carefully considered, because you're diluting the understanding of the audience for what you're supposed to be doing and the value you deliver. It's a recipe for churn. It's a recipe for confusion. And it's a recipe for saying, oh, I can do that in my other tool, so I'll just not even consider this. And in a world where it's either a really strategic, laser-focused point solution or an all-in-one solution, those are the two winners right now. The in-between isn't really finding traction in this world of efficient growth that we find ourselves in 2023. You got to be focused. You got to be able to articulate why you're doing what you're doing so that your customer can have a better understanding of that. And I think a lot of companies out there, they lack the guidance from their leadership to make sure that everyone knows and everyone can rattle off that one sentence vision, right? That one sentence category definition, whatever it is. I don't care if it's the bookkeeper at your company or if it's the most experienced product marketing professional, especially the founder. Everyone should be able to say those same 7, 10, 12, 15 words. And if they can't, that's product marketing's job to make sure that that becomes true. And whatever you need to do, to go to your CEO and say, hey, look, people in our company don't get it. They can't tell us, they can't tell each other or their family what we do. So how can we expect our reps to do that? Mm-hmm. We've got to fix this problem right now. And I'm going to need your help. I'm going to need your strategic help, you CEO. And if you can't do that, or if the CEO sloughs that off and says, well, I don't have time. I've got other things I'm dealing with. I'm making a board deck. Like, sure, those are important, but that board deck's not going to look very good in 2-3 quarters if you don't address this problem. So I think it's something you need to have open discussions about and tell the truth about and say, hey, look, people don't get it. Our product managers are out there building features that we don't need, or at least they don't tie back to the vision that you set. So we either need to adjust the vision or adjust what we're building. And it kind of ties back to what I was talking about that I learned early on in my career, which is, hey, what are we trying to do? Okay, if we're not following that, then we need to adjust. We need to address that problem right there.
Again, it feels, as you articulate all this insight, it feels like that's the type of thinking that as an early stage founder we have to have, right? Like, there's nothing more, I think, disruptive than having like a tagline, early day one or early days, that's like a platform for, let's just say productivity, optimization. You're just
sure. Supercharge your cloud compute and make sure that you have that you're going to grow 10x over there.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay, come on.
Everybody says that, right?
Yeah, everyone says that, and that doesn't give me anything specific. Maybe, the companies now, like let's say Outreach and SalesLoft, they have built over the last decade these categories, right? Now we can say, oh, we're a sales engagement platform. But if you remember early on, it was like, specifically SalesLoft, before they had their email product, they had that list building. It was like build lists of leads, right? Like very specific. And so again, when you just talk about that messaging, if you screw that up early on, you're going to either not be around too long, or you're going to, waste a lot of time getting to the point where then you have to strip away all the fluff. There was a friend of mine, Aaron Ross, wrote this book, The Predictable Revenue. I remember, I don't know, this was maybe 10 years ago. We did this, these workshops. We did this workshop specifically in Los Angeles. I remember sitting there with a bunch of founders, and Aaron literally went around, and maybe there was 20 people in the room. We were at UCLA, I think. Anyways, and he would ask their tagline, and they'd give, optimization platform for blah, blah, blah. And he'd be like, what do you actually do? And we went through that whole thing. And it's funny because Aaron wasn't a product marketer, but essentially he was thinking as a founder and trying to get these early stage founders to like really get to the root of what their vision was, and not just vision level, but like, oh yeah, I get that. Right. So that really, makes sense a lot. What would you say if folks are out there and they're like, okay, Chris, George, you talked a lot about, these nuances and the intricacies as well. Like, but what is product marketing from your perspective? What would you say is product marketing at, let's say, a B2B SaaS company? And what should be those responsibilities? Let's just say early on, that like first set of product marketers, maybe that first one, or maybe, and maybe we can extend a little bit. Maybe you got a 2 or 3 person product marketing team. What should they focus on? And I say that because, I know at larger organizations, they can get very specialized, right? They're focused on competitive intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. But that early, first set of PMMs.
I'd say that what product marketing's charter ought to be is, and it ties back to something that I mentioned earlier, is that product marketing is to understand the customer and talk with customers so that we can use the words that they use back to them and make sure that everyone in the organization is saying those same words. That's what I think. Ultimately, that's the charter, right? That's what you want, because there are product marketing managers out there who are in some way prohibited either by lack of experience or too much red tape in just talking with customers, right? Prerequisite number one, you must be able to talk with customers to hear what they have to say. If that's writing along on sales calls, if it's listening to sales calls, that's second best, right? There's a lot of ways to do that. But I would say if you're not spending time with customers, digging into their problems, saying, oh, tell me more about that, right? Then you're not going to discover the words that need to surface in your headlines, in your feature launches, in the way people ask for things. You need to ask 5 whys, back to all of that, and have those conversations so that you can feed that back and give your reps the framework to use so that they don't have to come back to you about a meeting that's coming up in 2 hours, so that they can feel empowered and understand the story at a very simplistic level, right? All the way back up to that vision and like, hey, we're here to do this, right? We're here to give you this, right? If you can say that all the way down and kind of say, and so we ended up building a platform that allows you to do that. And let me tell you, we got this great new feature, and it allows us to achieve that same goal we just talked about by knocking this little bit out of your workflow, right? Like if you can't tell that story, then product marketing is at fault. Right? Product marketing needs the time and space in order to help shape those stories and tell those stories, and also to help the reps understand how to have a conversation about things. Because reps are put in a place where, especially with organizations without sales engineering function, they're put in a place where they're asked technical questions and things like that, right? You need to be able to navigate those conversations and be able to know where to look for content that answers those questions really quickly. And also just how to have a more strategic conversation so that you're not hopping on and just trying to show a demo of things. You need to be able to pull out all of the things that that person wants and needs without feeling like you're qualifying them. And also to have that one place that you can look for questions on the fly. And I'd say that that's prerequisite number 2, is that you have one place where you can train the reps that they can type into a search box for something that they need and have it pop up, or at least have the stub of it pop up where you say, hey, I don't have this yet, but they need to be able to have a place to go type in. If you don't give them that place to type something in and search for it, then what's going to happen is it's going to end up being typed into a Slack DM to you. And now you've got something to do in the next 2 hours. And that's never good for anyone. So 2 things. Give people the words to use so that their customers have the words that they can use to tell other people about your product. And second, to give your sales reps and anyone who's been interfacing with customers one place, and I mean one, not 5 different ones, one place to go and search for the things that they need that you update and you make sure are updated over time. If you're doing those 2 things pretty well, I'd say it'd be hard to point fingers at product marketing for not being able to close.
Awesome. I know we talked a little bit about AI earlier. What would you say from your perspective is going to be the impact of AI on the product marketing function?
I think we're seeing a lot in companies that maybe haven't put a lot of real thought leadership into their content. We're seeing content marketing programs getting scaled down. I saw a story online the other day about how a content marketing manager was let go, but in the weeks leading up, people would start to give requests to this person's name / ChatGPT, like starting to kind of trivialize the work they were doing. The culture was around that. So it was clear that there were people in the company that didn't see value in the content, right? They wanted it still. They still wanted it. So it was valuable enough to ask for it, but it wasn't valuable enough to worry about the human behind it. It certainly wasn't valuable enough to give them the time to spend on this kind of thing, right? On making it actual good content. So content marketing and that function is getting hit harder first, right? Product marketing has a lot of jobs to do, as we've discussed, right? A lot of it's internal alignment. And I don't know that you can have a chatbot take over internal alignment, like that, maybe, but and maybe with the latter of the 2 prerequisites I shared before, right? With knowing where to go look for things, there's probably a great application for AI there. I know that tools will emerge that, if they're not already out there, that will like take on the conversation that's happening live right now that you and I are having right now, George. And it might pop up an asset that you might want to share based on the words that are being used, right? There's ways to do live transcription and make suggestions based on things. I think those kind of things will happen. So sales enablement will become easier, or maybe just like the tactical application of the sales enablement function that product marketing is responsible for will become easier. There's a lot of focus right now on content and how you can produce content and have it produce content for you. If you look at really impactful positioning and messaging for campaigns, you might be able to use ChatGPT or something like it to come up with a bunch of headline variations. And I've done this myself. I've said, hey, look, I'm running on this campaign. And I'll type this into the thing. Like, hey, here's what this platform does. Here are some copywriters I look up to. Like I might cite David Ogilvy, right? Hey, in the style of David Ogilvy, and then 3 other ones, and use the principles of influence from Robert Cialdini. Like, give me back a few ways to describe this product on a sales page. I've gotten some pretty great ideas by doing something like that. And I'll cite specific influences and teach it what the kind of my style that I've picked up and pulled out of these great people who've come before me. And it's given me some great ideas, but generally it's like at best it's a rough draft, or it's like, oh, there's this 2 or 3 word thing there that I can really use and hook into. But I think the true impact is yet to be seen. I don't know. And that's where a lot of folks are, is like, we don't know what this is going to mean for everything, because I do see also a future, George, where there are AI agents talking to other people on behalf of their AI agents, or talking to AI, and like, we don't actually interface as much with one another. And I think that what we can do in the meantime, or alongside that, that trend, is we can choose to go a different path, and we can choose to focus on relationships, focus on the human element of all of this, focus on psychology and what makes people actually tick. Because if you just rely on ChatGPT to write up a sales page or a landing page and call that product marketing, what you're going to get is a very homogenized piece of content that is going to be very similar to what another company might do. And then that's sort of the nadir of all product marketers, is that they find themselves describing things in a really bland way, and then everyone's kind of back to that 10x cloud compute optimization thing that people all kind of end up with when you do design of messaging by committee. And so the worst thing you can do is just pull in and fully submit to the ultimate committee, which is what these large language models are.
Yeah, totally. Chris, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your insights. It's so clear when you talk to someone who's done it before multiple times and is just has a visionary perspective on this whole category. You know, if folks want to get in contact with you, I know you have a newsletter and some exciting kind of update things that you're working on now. What are the best like URLs or channels to reach you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. Is a great place to go. I've also got a playbook around some of these things that I've kind of been codifying to help remind myself what I need to be doing. I've got that. I've got a website, chrishandy.blog. If you go there, chrishandy.blog/playbook, you'll be able to find it.
You know, you mentioned that, reminding yourself. That's why I do these podcasts. I've been doing them for years. I mean, I just sit back and learn. I literally wrote notes while you were talking because it's like a really great way for me to just continue to learn from others like yourself. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you again for being on the show, and also for your insights just around what we're building and just this whole category. So yeah, thanks so much, and have a wonderful afternoon.
You too. I'm excited about what Asset Mule is building, and I look forward to updates from you as well. Thanks,
Awesome.
George.
Take care.